It appears that there are individuals that are trying to censor games off of Steam and censor fiction, thinking that it will cause harm. Naturally, this comes with a lot of doubt. It appears that Collective Shout, an incredibly conservative, anti-abortion, and anti-anything, really, and arguably anti-trans organization, has worked with hate groups like the NCOSE, formerly Morality and Media, that was historically and still is an anti-LGBT organization, asking for the removal of all things that are NSFW, even removal of children's access to health and understanding of LGBT issues. The idea of caring about what happens to fictional people is absolutely ludicrous. The idea that any such things cause harm is not scientific in the least. But a journalist that actually did a look into Collective Shout and their nefarious activities has indeed been censored by Vice and had their article suppressed by Vice because of unknown reasons by Savage Ventures. It is suspected that Savage Ventures may be working or having some way and shape or form monetarily involved with this organization and other family organizations as well that are anti-LGBT and everything. It seems that Savage Ventures has their fingers in a lot of pies just to make money. This was a picture of their letter, alleging that fiction indeed causes harm. But this is not the case in any scientific way. The Woodhull Freedom Foundation, the ACLU, and many other organizations understand that irrealis is not harm. That which is not real has no victim. But Anna Valens was indeed censored. She was indeed hurt by Vice and Waypoint because of their monetary interest, and so she left. The thing is, Collective Shout and their ilk wanted to ban Detroit Become Human for so-called abuse against women and child abuse, even though the entire idea behind Detroit Become Human is to vilify these things and to show them in a very negative light. And Valve and any payment processor is incredibly scared simply because we do not uphold the ideas of Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition. With these laws and the like, if we try to punish irrealis, we would have to punish Call of Duty, we would have to punish Dead by Daylight, and we would have to punish GTA. You can find both articles here. It's rather clear by Collective Shout's rhetoric that they are incredibly angry and using emotion rather than reason to stop fiction. Now, I hope that they do spend their resources to help real women, and I do hope that they do comment on child brides in Yemen, and they have. That is disgusting, and of course, abuse of women. However, to blame games for real-life suffering is incredibly disgusting and disrespectful to victims of all sorts of harm. Even if you spend 1% of your efforts trying to police fiction, trying to make sure that it doesn't normalize when there is no scientific evidence that it does, then you are wasting time and not respecting real victims. This put devs and artists of all kinds under undue stress, not much unlike the conservative right of yesteryear. Except now, they're going after the very economy and things that keep us afloat. They're rubbishing the First Amendment. They're rubbishing free expression. They're making sure that certain games and expression cannot be. And with how Collective Shout thinks that what is in Detroit Become Human is somehow going to normalize harm against women and children, then they're absolutely not in the right mind, or even according to science. Why is it that Game of Thrones and Euphoria and even Cuties can exist while this games and other things are seen as obscene material? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. With the opinion of Justice Adams, with the Section L of New York State's 2026 budget, criminalizing AI and other generated images, not for copyright theft or anything, but because of trying to make it a crime or obscenity. At its outset, it is necessary to appreciate, as I think, that there's a fundamental difference in the kind of depiction of an actual human and something that is imaginary. There's a tendency in the arguments to say that there's only one degree of separation, but this is quite wrong. At the outset of it is necessary to appreciate, as I think, that there's been a fundamental difference in the kind of depiction of an actual human being and the depiction of an imaginary person. That there's a tendency in the arguments to suggest that the distinction is merely one degree. This is quite wrong. Such an approach would trivialize porn and the idea of really bad and exploitative porn, and even those involved as corn of a most terrible thing. And then it would make legally culpable anybody who would own Romeo and Juliet, or even the Bible, because it contains depictions of those kinds of things. So that is why the state bar and federal aid and legal aid reject entirely Part L of the 2026 New York State budget, because it would trivialize these and take away justice from people who need it. It would take away punishment from people who actually do bad deeds, especially to women and children. Unfortunately, this website and its creators have hated certain games and reality because they think it actually causes harm. This is nothing short of right-wing propaganda. This is nothing short of extremist propaganda, of thinking of the children as to try and protect them so that we cannot have any sort of thing. But except male fan service exists. Game of Thrones exists. Euphoria, which is depicting individuals under a certain age engaging in acts I cannot speak in on this app, and that is seen as even artistic. If they can't understand context like this, and they still think that fiction, even if it's disgusting and uncomfortable, can be of use, well, then it's there. However, this is exactly the kind of depictions and fiction and irrealis that is actually what they're fighting against and have the games banned for. And these people are saying lingerie and sexy clothing and makeup and dolls are all part of some way abuse. This is, of course, absolutely ridiculous. It may be icky to some, but if you always look at everything as being exploitation instead of actually seeing as some empowerment of, especially of people of 18 plus clothes and lingerie, then what are you doing? That's not very feminist. That doesn't make any sense. You're saying clothing and advertising is a problem, and I'm sure it is to a point, but none of this has any data. And what culture? You mean the R-word culture? The very thing that not even RAINN, the pro-women and helpers of those of victim of incredible crimes, said that was ever a thing? That the entire R-word culture was done as a study of inmate populations in prison. Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition realizes that not real things do not cause real harm. Otherwise, Romeo and Juliet and the Bible would have to be banned. They had a campaign against the game No Mercy, and it shows that they didn't even play the game, and the screenshots that they showed of it were not even part of the game itself. And this organization, Collective Shout, has been working with incredibly conservative, incredibly restrictive, and anti-LGBT individuals trying to pass KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, it has an express interest in removing trans content online. We have been calling this out for 5 years at the very least. Vera Dark has absolutely done that. She's a YouTuber that, even though she is problematic in her own right, and I'm pretty sure it could be seen that way, was the first to sound the alarm with NCOSC targeting Steam and games. This is no doubt a free speech issue. This is an issue of censorship. This is an issue of right to payment processors and their access. Otherwise, artists will starve, you will not be able to exist, and freedom of speech doesn't mean anything if you don't have the right to hear and listen.